بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، نبينا محمد المبعوث للناس أجمعين، وعلى آله وصحبه وسائر المهتدين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So we're still studying the side topics, or the topics that weren't discussed in the 4 main videos. And for today, or this lesson, we're just going to be talking about al-ikhfa, or more specifically, the ghunna of the ikhfa. How the sound, or how come the sound of the ghunna changes from one letter to another. And just a quick reminder, or a quick revision, ikhfa we said is, for example, the word al-insan. We pronounce the hamza, which is the first one. And then after that, when it's the time for the noon, we don't pronounce the noon, and we just do kind of like idgham, but keep the ghunna without shadda. That's why you said idgham. Ikhfa is just like idgham, but different, and just like idhar, but different. Similar to idgham, that you don't pronounce the noon. Similar to idhar, that you have the ghunna. Different than idhar, that you don't pronounce the noon, and different than the idgham, where you don't do idgham, as in you don't combine the first letter with the second letter. So al-insan with ikhfa is gonna be al-insan. And the haraka is 2 harakat. When the 2 harakat are over, you pronounce the next letter. And during this 2 harakat, your tongue, your mouth, is supposed to be ready to pronounce the next letter, the letter after the noon. And we said the haraka, one haraka is equal to the period it takes to pronounce one moving letter. Yani one letter with haraka. Now, about the ghunna. Before we actually talk about the ghunna, the sounds of the ghunna, we must first understand 2 main topics, or 2 important topics. And it is related to the characteristics of the letters, which is al-ista'la and al-istifal. Just a quick background. So the characteristics of the letters is categorized into 2. Characteristics that have its opposites, and ones that don't have its opposites. We're not going to go into details about it because this is not the place for it. But what's important to know is al-ista'la is in that one with the characteristics that have its opposite. And the opposite of ista'la is istifal. So al-ista'la lughatan means to ascend, right? To rise up, to make something go up. Okay? That's what al-ista'la means linguistically. As for istilahan, ista'la is produced when the tongue is raised upwards in a way that causes the sound to hit the roof of the upper jaw, creating an echo sound. We said tongues generally here, but specifically we mean the furthest part of the tongue. You know, the one that's close to the throat. That's when it's raised up, the sound will travel, from the vocal folds, and then all the way until it hits the roof of your upper jaw, which will cause an echo sound. And we're going to explain it later, inshallah. And al-istifal, since we said it's the opposite of ista'la, it is in linguistic meaning, and istilahan it is the opposite. So linguistically means to descend, right? As for istilahan, is produced when the tongue is down in a way that causes the sound to not hit the roof of the upper jaw, and thus not creating this echo sound that we talked about. So the tongue, or more specifically the furthest part of the tongue, the one we mentioned before, the close to the throat, is down or in a normal state, which causes the sound, which is produced by the vocal folds, to just go out normally without hitting the roof of your upper jaw, creating the echo sound. Now let's take some examples for it to be more clear. Alright, so we have the sad, and then in the other picture, the one on the left, we have the sin and the zai. This shows how the mouth is supposed to look like when pronouncing the sad and the sin and the zai. How the mouth is supposed to look like, how the tongue is supposed to look like. So from the definitions before of al-ista'la and al-istifal, which one of these 2 has the condition or the characteristic of ista'la, or which one has istifal? From what we said, the tongue should be raised upwards, right? So, more specifically, the furthest part of the tongue. So which one of those has the tongue raised upwards? It is the sad. Why? Because as you can see here, right here, how it's raised upwards, and how it's kind of concaved on this part, leaving this, leaving this hollow space here. So the sound travels from the throat all the way, and because the tongue is raised upwards, it hits the roof. This hits here and creates this echo sound that we mentioned before. And do keep in mind this echo sound, right? How it is produced, because it's important later on. As for the sin and zai, you see the sound will travel and won't hit the upper roof. Why? Because the tongue is not raised upwards, right? It's normal. So the sound will travel normally out of the mouth, so not creating this echo sound. And even you can notice it yourself. For example, say so, say, and then the sin and the zai, sa, za, so. You feel this sod is heavy, right? Is huge or heavy compared to the sin and zai. Another example is ta, dal, and ta. You see how the ta looks like and how the ta and dal look like. Which one of those has ista'la and which is istifal? The ta has the ista'la because look how the tongue, the furthest part, is raised upwards. This causes the sound to hit the roof of the upper jaw, creating the echo sound, the heavy sound, we're gonna call it the heavy sound. As for the dal and ta, the tongue is normally shaped, which makes the sound go out immediately without hitting the roof, which causes the echo sound. Even you can see yourself say to, to, to. You see it's heavy when you compare it to the, ta, the, ta. You know, you feel the to is heavier. Another example, last example, dha, dhal, and tha. So which one is ista'la and istifal? Dha is ista'la. Why? Because the tongue, as we said, is raised upwards, furthest part, which causes the sound to hit the roof and echo sound, heavy sound. Dha, opposite of dhal and tha, the, tha, dha. See, it's heavy. So now that we know this, let's go back to the definitions we mentioned before. We said that ista'la is produced when the tongue is raised upwards until the end, right? So what we're gonna do is split this definition into two parts. Ista'la is produced when the tongue is raised upwards. This is part one, alright? Put this part for ista'la. Keep in mind this is for ista'la. In a way that causes the sound to hit the roof of the upper jaw, creating an echo sound. Okay, so this second part is called tafkhim, right? This echo sound that's created by the ista'la is tafkhim. So the heavy sound you hear, to, so, this heavy sound, dha, this is called tafkhim, right? So al-ista'la, when the tongue is raised upwards, this is ista'la. What the sound is created is tafkhim, which you could say translates to heavy, right? Heavy sound, you could say, or huge sound. So al-ista'la, like I said, the tongue when it's raised, this is ista'la. When the sound goes out and hits the upper, it is gonna hit the roof, the roof of your upper jaw, right? And that sound, that echo, is called tafkhim. Alright? Same with istifal. Let's split this into two parts as well. Istifal is produced when the tongue is down. This is part one. This is istifal. In a way that causes the sound to not hit the roof of the upper jaw, thus not creating the echo sound. And this is called tarqiq. So when the tongue is down, this is istifal. And the sound that it produces, because it's not hitting the roof of the upper jaw, thus not creating an echo, is called tarqiq. So for ista'la, it is a must to have tafkhim, heavy sound. And for istifal, it is a must to have tarqiq, which is not heavy sound. You could say a thin sound or soft sound, right? So from this, we know that all the letters of ista'la are letters of tafkhim, and all the letters of istifal are letters of tarqiq. And what are the letters of ista'la? They are khussa, daghtin, qidh. So all these letters have the heavy quality or characteristics. Has ista'la, ergo has tafkhim. And same with istifal. Istifal is the rest of the letters, alright? So all of them have tarqiq, this soft sound, this thin sound. Except the alif, lam, and ra. These, sometimes they are heavy, sometimes they're not. And this is not the time to talk about them, maybe in the future, inshallah. Now you might be asking, what does this have to do with the ghunna, the sound of the ghunna? How is this related? Well, if you look here, on the right, we have the mouth, how it's supposed to be like in the state of ikhfa, when after it is a letter qaf, when after it is qaf. For example, min qabl, right? So when you're on the noon, this is how the mouth is supposed to look like. And on the left, for example, the word man kan, for example, man kan, this is how the mouth is supposed to look like. When you're on the noon and about to pronounce the kaf, you're still in the two harakat phase. So from what we studied before, which one is ista'la, a letter of ista'la, and thus having the quality of tafkhim? Is the qaf. And the kaf has the quality of istifal, which means has the quality of tarqiq, sound being soft. So how is this related to the ghunna? Well, there's a ruling that says if a noon sakina or tanween, after it is a letter of ikhfa, we look, is it a letter of tafkhim or is it a letter of tarqiq? If it's a letter of tafkhim, the ghunna takes the sound of the letter, as in the ghunna becomes mufakhama, becomes heavy. And if it's a letter of tarqiq, the ghunna becomes soft, thin. What do I mean by this? For example, min qabl, okay? You say min, you notice min qabl. See, the ghunna is heavy. Compare this to man kana, for example. Man can. See, compare these two. The sounds are different, right? Why? Because, like we said, the qaf is mufakhama, thus the noon becomes mufakhama. The kaf is muraqqaqa, and thus the ghunna becomes muraqqaqa. And the qaf, I just want to note here, the qaf and the kaf are special letters, you could say. Why? Because when you're on the, for ikhfa, when you're on the noon and preparing to pronounce the qaf or the kaf, their makhraj, their point, articulation point is from the furthest part, using the furthest part of the tongue, which means, like the arrows indicate here, sound doesn't go out. There will be only from the mouth, alright? Sound would be only little, really small, right? It's not that strong compared to the ghunna, not from the nostril part. The qaf, because look how the tongue is prepared to pronounce the qaf, which means it blocks the sound from going out from the mouth. So there should only be small sound, light, not that strong. Same with the kaf, it's blocking, which only produces from the mouth only light sound. Unlike the nostril, which all the sound or most of the sound will come from. This is for the qaf and the kaf. What about the other letters, for example? Let's go back. Which one is tafkhim? We said sad is tafkhim because it's ista'la, and the others are tarqiq. Now, how will the ghunna be for the sad, which is a letter of tafkhim? For example, let's take the word وَلَئِن صَبَرْتُمْ. It's going to be like وَلَئِن صَبَرْتُمْ وَلَئِن صَبَرْتُم. See how it's heavy? Unlike seeing, for example, al-insan, and the zai, for example, فَإِن زَلَلْتُمْ, okay? It would be like فَإِن زَلَلْتُمْ. See, it's different than the sad is different than the sin and zai. Another example is ta, dal, and ta. For example, the ta min طلعها, it will be like min طلعها. So you notice how it's heavy. As for the dal and ta, for example, ta, man tab, for example, man tab. For dal, for example, min dun. You see the difference. And final one, dha, dhal, and tha. For example, ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا. It will be like ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا. The tha, for example, like manthura. It will be like manthura. That would be like a word man-dha, and so on. So now, inshallah, you understand the difference between tafkhim and tarqiq. But last point to mention before we finish, not all the letters, just because, for example, the sin and the ta, just because there are letters of tarqiq that are soft, doesn't mean the ghunna of both of their ghunna are the same. They differ. So in order to get the sound of the ghunna and ikhfa right, I would recommend you could search YouTube open a sheikh who's mastered Tajweed, for example, Sheikh Ayman Rushdi, just type a surah, like for example, the surah from Qasar al-Mufassal at the end of the Quran, because they're most recited by people, so it makes sense for someone to start with them. So listen to them and record yourself and compare the two until you get it right, inshallah. Or you could go recite to a sheikh, which will be better because he can tell you what you're doing wrong, what you should be doing. And not only with ijazah, can be someone who studied under a person who has ijazah and knows this specific topic. He knows it well. Yani the one who he was reciting to, the one who has ijazah, taught him and he knows how to recite it correctly. Then you can go to that guy as well. So these are the methods I recommend for you to take if you want to fix your ikhfa, the ghunna of the ikhfa, because usually, if not all the times, most of the times, people don't get it correctly. On their own, they need practice. It is practiced until they get it right, inshallah. So this is the final video concerning ahkam Noon As-Sakeenah and Tanween. May Allah accept from me and you our righteous deeds and forgive our sins and mistakes. See you all next semester, inshallah. We're going to be discussing أحكام النون sorry, not أحكام النون ساكن التنوين, I mean أحكام المد إن شاء الله. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.